Welcome to Heartfelt Stores. My name is Eliza Morgan, and I was 34 years old when my sister looked straight into my eyes and told me to find somewhere else to die. 3 days after we buried our parents. 3 days. I was still walking with a cane from the accident that shattered my spine 2 years earlier. The flowers on Mom and Dad's graves hadn't even begun to wilt. The house still smelled like sympathy lilies and casseroles. And there she stood in the doorway, Madison. Arms crossed, moving boxes stacked behind her like she was preparing for a garage sale instead of dismantling her sister's life. Before I go any further, please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled, because what happened next still makes my hands shake. Madison didn't cry. Not even a little. Her husband, Trevor, hovered behind her, silent and uncomfortable. She had that same polished expression she always wore at charity events. Controlled, perfect, untouchable. "I've spoken to the lawyer," she said. "Everything goes to me. The house, the accounts. You have 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I had moved back home after a drunk driver ran a red light and nearly ended my life. 11 hours in surgery. Metal rods in my back. Doctors whispering words like maybe and unlikely. I had built a landscape design business from scratch before that. I had clients, contracts, a future. Then I had hospital ceilings and rehabilitation charts instead. For 18 months I used a wheelchair. I learned how to ask for help without crying. I learned how to swallow pride. My mother read to me when the pain was unbearable. My father built a ramp so I could sit in the garden again. Madison," she called once in a while. "Oh, you're still there," she'd say. "Put Mom on." Still there. Like I was a stain that wouldn't scrub out. What she didn't know was that 4 months before our parents died, I had started walking again. First with a walker, then with a cane. Slowly, painfully, but I was getting stronger. To her I was still broken. That Christmas, the last one before the accident that took our parents' lives, Madison came home with her flawless husband, designer coat, perfectly styled children. She rearranged the house like it was a showroom, critiqued the table settings, directed everyone. I cooked her children's favorite meals while my back burned like fire. On Christmas morning we gathered for the family photo. Dad set the tripod. Mom adjusted the tree lights. The kids fought over the front spot. Madison smiled at me. "Maybe sit this one out," she said lightly. "We want a nice card this year." The room went quiet. The cane ruins the aesthetic. I wasn't even in the wheelchair anymore. I walked into the kitchen and watched them pose through the window. I heard the camera click. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't know then that Dad saw everything. And I definitely didn't know what he did the very next day. 3 months later, our parents boarded a private flight to attend an old friend's wedding. The plane never landed. Mechanical failure, they said. Quick, they said. I was trimming Mom's roses when the phone rang. 30 seconds later the world felt hollow. Like someone had scooped everything meaningful out of my chest and left only echo. Madison handled the funeral. The guest list. The flowers. She turned grief into a production. And 3 days after we buried them she brought boxes. "Find somewhere else to die," she said. Rose, the nurse who cared for our parents, stood in the hallway and gasped. Our neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, dropped the casserole dish she was holding. Madison didn't even blink. But here's what she didn't realize. My father never wrote notes. Never. Yet that night, when I sat in his study shaking, I opened his desk drawer and found a business card. On the back, in his careful handwriting, "Call him. He knows everything." And that's when I realized something. Madison thought I was powerless. She thought I had nothing left. She was very, very wrong. If you think this is where I finally fought back, wait until you hear what happened at the lawyer's office 3 days later. Because that was the moment everything shifted. 3 days after Madison threw me out, she came back, carrying cardboard boxes like she owned the walls themselves. Trevor followed behind, silent, careful not to touch anything that might mark her perfection. "Pack your things," she said flatly. "You have until Friday." I was practicing walking without my cane. Physical therapy had finally given me independence. My back ached, but I wanted to prove I could do this on my own. "I need more time," I said, my voice trembling. "Still pretending to be sick?" she snapped, tossing a box toward me. You've milked it long enough. I froze. Derek, her husband, shifted uncomfortably. In the doorway, Rose, the nurse who had cared for my parents, stopped mid-step. Beside her, our neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, had her hands on her chest. They'd heard everything. Madison didn't even glance at them. Her gaze was sharp, cold, and perfectly calculated. Find somewhere else to die, she said. You're useless now. The words lingered. I could feel my chest tighten. My hands shook, but I refused to let tears fall. Then Rose did something unexpected. She pulled a small notebook from her pocket and wrote something down quickly, almost imperceptibly, like she was recording the vitals of my dignity. And then Maggie, our neighbor who had known Mom since before I was born, stepped forward. Madison Eileen Morgan, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like ice. Your mother would roll in her grave if she heard you speak like that. Madison blinked. Confusion crossed her face. I've known this family 40 years, Maggie continued. Longer than you've even been alive. And I know what caring for someone truly means. She walked over and placed her hand on my shoulder. The room shifted. Everyone could feel it. Your mother and father weren't blind, she said softly. And neither are we. Madison's jaw tightened. She grabbed Derek and marched out. The door slammed. I was left alone, but for the first time I felt a spark of hope. Not just because someone stood with me, but because someone saw the truth. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who should have cared for you, type I know in the comments. Sometimes the quiet ones see everything. 3 days later, I held my father's business card again. Harold Whitmore, estate attorney. On the back, 6 simple words. Call him. He knows everything. The next step would change everything. I arrived at Harold Whitmore's office on the 12th floor. The city sprawled below like a silent witness. Victoria No Madison was already there, sitting like a queen. Derek fiddled nervously with his phone. I took a seat across from them, my cane leaning against the chair. Madison didn't even look at me. Harold entered, calm and deliberate. Silver hair, measured movements, the kind of authority you can't argue with. Thank you for coming, he said. Before we begin the reading, I need to verify a few things. He opened a folder and looked at Madison. Mrs. Hartley, have you seen the complete will your parents filed with my office? Yes, she said, smooth as ever. 4 pages. Standard legal language. Everything left to me. Harold nodded slowly. That was a preliminary draft. The legal executed version is here. He placed a thick blue-bound document on the table. My heart pounded. Derek's hand fell to the table. His face paled. This is fraud, Madison hissed. She forged it. Harold didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I have been your family's attorney for 22 years. I do not commit fraud. I watched Madison's face cycle through disbelief, panic, fury. They wouldn't do this, she whispered. They wouldn't. Perhaps it's time to let your parents speak for themselves, Harold said, and began reading. To our daughter Madison Louise Morgan, we leave our investment portfolio, approximately $14 million, in a managed trust. Madison may withdraw $50,000 per year. The rest is for her children upon turning 30. I could see the color drain from her face. And the family home? Harold continued. For $1 million. We leave it to our daughter Eliza Morgan. It may not be sold for 10 years. She has been our comfort and companion. She has earned it. I blinked. The house. My parents' home. The garden. Every rose, every stone path mine. And then Harold placed a small USB drive on the table. My parents had left a recorded message. Madison's head snapped up. A moment later, Mom appeared on the screen. She looked tired but strong. Dad stood behind her. Girls, Mom began, her voice steady. If you are watching this, it means we're gone and things have unfolded as we feared. Dad's voice followed, deliberate, precise. Madison, you are our firstborn. We love you, but love is not blindness. We have seen how you treat your sister. And we choose not to let our deaths erase her. Mom's eyes softened. Eliza, you were never useless. You are our quiet strength. You showed up when no one else did. I could feel the tears rise, but I didn't fall apart. Not yet. Madison's chair scraped back. She stood. She walked out. Silence fell. And just when I thought it was over, The real reckoning was about to begin. I found Madison in the hallway outside the conference room. She leaned against the wall, arms wrapped around herself. Derek hovered nearby, phone pressed to his ear. "This isn't fair," she said, voice trembling. "I have responsibilities. I have children." "You have a sister you told to die," I said quietly. 3 days after we buried our parents." She flinched. "I didn't mean." "Yes, you did." Her shoulders shook. She was crying now, mascara streaking her cheeks. The bank, the investments, the school tuition. Derek whispered numbers that hung in the air like smoke. $400,000. "You don't have kids," she spat. "You don't need anything." "You're right," I said softly. "I don't. But I also didn't treat my sister like garbage. I didn't tell her to die. I didn't exclude her from her family." For a moment, I could see the little girl I remembered behind her anger. Lost. Afraid. I could have destroyed her. I could have listed every cruel word she'd said, every action she'd taken to diminish me. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped closer. "You will never speak to me like that again," I said. "Ever. Not in private, not in public, not in front of your children. I am done being your punching bag." She looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. "I have a proposal," I continued. "The trust gives you $50,000 per year. That won't cover your immediate needs. I am willing to loan you what you need to pay the bank, keep the kids in school, reasonable terms, no interest. But one condition." I held up my hand. "You apologize publicly at the family dinner, in front of everyone from the memorial reception. You admit you were wrong." The hallway went silent. Derek froze. Madison didn't answer. She simply looked at me. I had found my power. And it wasn't vengeance. It was clarity. The next chapter isn't about money or revenge. It's about what comes after being truly seen. And you won't want to miss it. 6 months after the reading, the house felt different. Quieter. Not empty, just settled. Like it had finally exhaled. I moved into my parents' bedroom one rainy afternoon. At first, I stood in the doorway for almost an hour, just staring at the bed, the curtains, the indentation in the carpet where my father's armchair had always rested. It felt strange sleeping where they had slept for 3 decades. The first night I cried into my pillow, whispering goodnight to ghosts. But by the 3rd night, something shifted. The morning sun streamed through the lace curtains exactly the way it always had, warming the hardwood floors. I woke up to the same view of the garden my mother had loved, and instead of breaking me, it steadied me. It felt like they had saved that room for me. Like they knew. My physical therapy continued 3 times a week. Some days I still reached for my cane out of habit, then laughed at myself because I didn't actually need it anymore. I could walk the length of the garden without stopping. I could stand at the stove and cook dinner without my back screaming in protest. I was getting stronger. Not just physically. People in the neighborhood had heard about the will. About the video. About what my sister had said. The same people who had laughed politely when she called me resourceful at the memorial now avoided eye contact when they saw me at the grocery store. They crossed the street. They suddenly found their phones fascinating. Let them. Shame has a funny way of traveling faster than gossip. My sister Lillian and her husband ended up selling their big house. The one with the marble foyer and the imported chandelier she used to brag about. They paid off most of their debts, but the lifestyle they had curated so carefully unraveled piece by piece. Her husband lost his position at his firm after questions surfaced about his creative accounting. Their children transferred schools. Lillian told everyone it was for better opportunities. Even she didn't believe that. 3 weeks after everything, my phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Is your offer still available?" Her voice sounded tired. Not sharp. Not superior. Just tired. "Yes," I said calmly. A pause. "I'm not ready to apologize publicly." Another pause. Longer this time. "Then I'm not ready to write a check." Silence. The line went dead. But she had called. That mattered. Have you ever had someone circle back after hurting you, but not quite ready to admit they were wrong? Type "I've seen that" in the comments if you know that dance. 2 months later, I finally opened my mother's diary. It had been sitting on my nightstand untouched. I'd trace her handwriting on the cover at night but never opened it. I was afraid. Afraid her words would split me open again. That evening I carried it into the garden. The roses were blooming stubbornly, wildly, like they refused to acknowledge grief. The first entries were simple. Grocery lists, doctor appointments, notes about rain. My mother had always been practical. Then the pages changed. I love my eldest daughter, but I worry she is chasing applause instead of peace. I swallowed hard. Sienna doesn't know how much she saved us after her accident. I thought we were caring for her. The truth is, her presence saved this house from loneliness. My vision blurred. She is quiet strength. She does not demand space. She earns it by being steady. The last line, written only weeks before the accident, nearly undid me. If you're reading this, my sweet girl, please know you were never a burden. You were our blessing. I pressed the diary to my chest and cried. Not the broken, gasping sobs from the funeral. These tears were softer, cleansing, like something inside me was finally being washed clean. I wasn't useless. I never had been. 6 months turned into a year. I started working again, part-time at first, consulting on small landscape projects in town. The first full project I took on was my own backyard. I redesigned it completely but kept my mother's roses. I added stone pathways, native grasses, a curved wooden bench facing the sunset. The day I finished, I sat on that bench and watched the light spill across the garden. It wasn't the life I had planned before the accident. It was better, because it was mine. For months after the reading, a letter arrived in the mail. Not a call. A letter. From Lillian. I don't know when I became the person who measures love in dollars. I don't know when I started seeing you as competition instead of my sister. I'm not ready to stand in front of everyone and admit what I did, but I am trying to understand it. And I am sorry. I read it 3 times. It wasn't the apology I demanded, but it was the first honest sentence she'd written to me in years. I placed the letter in my father's desk drawer beside my mother's diary, and the attorney's business card that had changed everything. We aren't close now. We may never be. But when we're in the same room, there's no venom, no performance, just distance. And sometimes, distance is healthier than closeness built on cruelty. I was told to find somewhere else to die. Instead, I found somewhere to live. And not just survive, live. Right here. In the house where I learned to walk the first time. And the second, tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Because sometimes the people who try to bury you forget something very important. Seeds grow in the dark. And oh, how I bloomed.